Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for returning to my channel. So the problem at the University of Miami is much more dire than I thought. So you could do a simple cursory search and just search University of Miami lawsuits, and you would find probably close to 10 lawsuits within the past 3 years, 3 to 5 years, give or take, from the university not paying their music teachers, female music teachers, the appropriate wage, to lawsuits from employees, retirement spending and investments to multiple discriminatory lawsuits. There was a lawsuit that recently was filed by a prominent surgeon. She was a chief surgeon, female Hispanic surgeon at UM last month. It was February the 8th. So this issue is not limited to me, just me. And an ex, a former classmate from 2017, a Hispanic guy, older guy, I think he was probably in his 40s when we started, um, had was removed from UM in similar fashion, just brutal. So I'd like to first apologize to some of my um, Hispanic comrades because we're all in the same fight. The ideology that UN perpetuates, or I should say, operate under, basically knows no bounds. If the institution can discriminate against a Hispanic physician, a top doctor, a top surgeon, then it's becoming more clear that they have a problem with foreigners, especially with people like me with a heavy accent. They have a problem with older people. They looks like they're more into the younger generation uh, of yellow skinned people. So we'll leave it as that. Um, with regards to more of to go further into the psychology, right? The the mindset, the the philosophy that drives this institution. I would like to direct your attention because that's not my expertise, but it's important to know what how people think and how it's not just people. Sometimes it could be the entire institution. It's important to know what drives them, what's their philosophy. It's one thing that they say one thing online, but that's rarely ever the case. Like the inclusion, the equity and inclusion and diversity, that's what is on the website. In fact, that's what's on every university's website. But you have to, if you go online and you see an institution got sued over 10 times in the past 3 years for all sorts of um, immoral acts, financially discriminatory, then your inclusion and diversity and fairness that you preach on your website makes no sense because we're judging you based on your deeds, not on what you say, right? So in addition to this video I'm going to show you from this prominent researcher, he's a he's a personality researcher, right? But his main focus is mostly on the dark side of the dark personality traits of human beings. In addition to that video, which was an interview done by Dr. Jordan Peterson, I would also like to speak about gaslighting, right? Gaslighting is basically when a perpetrator, right, an aggressor, and this happens to me all the time at UM. They would bring me into their office, and obviously, I recorded a lot of my meetings with them. So I will speak to my attorney to see if I should release some of this stuff for you guys to listen and see. And so, like I said, I have receipts. I have a lot of receipts. I could put out 100 videos providing receipts to every word I say. Right? I have the video. I have the recordings. So gaslighting is when you bring the victim into your office or the person you are committing your malicious act on and play this psychological game on them. You instill doubt in them. You you have them speak. For example, I was often asked, specifically by Dr. Gonzalez, "Oh, Robert, how do you think you're doing?" How do you think you're doing? Well, I'm doing good. Yeah, I've had some very good evaluations, and you know, the nurses that I work with in pre-op and post-op, they're fairly happy with me helping, and I do IVs for them before surgery, stuff like that. So basically, what are you insinuating exactly? How do you think you're doing, right? So instilling doubt. So gaslighting is to have someone doubt their own validity, their own sanity. So well, that doesn't. And then once I tell them, I kind of knew the game. I didn't know the word. It's funny, like I learned all these words after, like, what happened to me, right? Gaslighting, strawmanning, right? And victim blaming basically is when you are committing an act on someone and you still have the nerve to turn around and blame them for what you just did to them. That was done not only by the professors but by the deans in their appeal hearing, and when I did an appeal, the answer to my appeals. So if eventually you will see my second dismissal papers from Dr. Brado, where he blamed me, where he's basically saying you are ultimately you have been removed from the program because of this failure back in 2020. You blaming me for something I had no control over. Dr. Gonzalez discriminated against me, created a bunch of fake documents after he asked me to resign, and then you did not deliver justice back in 2020, and then now he retaliated. You still have the gall to support this second abuse that you're about to do on the first abuse. You blaming me for something that happened to me in 2020 to justify your second abuse of me right now. I mean, you can't make this story up. That's why I have to provide you the receipts so you can see it for yourself. Victim blaming, all these things are heavy, heavy psychological games that these people play, right? So it wasn't just the professors, like the entire culture at UM, from the university, looks like, even to the medical school and the hospital, pop and music in the music area, and these lawsuits that you see online are probably they likely make a very small percentage of the rest of the people that are actually getting abused, because it costs money to bring about a lawsuit, right? So the physician, the chief, very prominent Hispanic female doctor, when I went through her lawsuit, right? Because all this stuff is public knowledge, right? It's available to the public. You just have to spend a little money and a couple dollars, and then get the lawsuit that the attorneys file themselves, because it's public knowledge. At the end of the paper, the lawsuit that the her attorneys filed, I saw like at least four different attorneys. One of them was a lawyer and a doctor and stuff like that. So I'm assuming she spent a lot of money to, it was very thorough. 50, I'm gonna post that. I'm gonna put that in a link so you could, if you ever feel inclined or bored and you want to read 51 page of her lawsuit, it's available. You can click the link, right? So four different attorneys. I'm assuming she paid some money to have that lawsuit bring about. That's obviously no one's gonna spend tens of thousands of dollars to pay all these attorneys if it's based on feelings or based on some false claim. So this is a woman who suffered years and years and years of discrimination, which eventually bring her to this point. So that's very important to know. And another thing, right, I'd like to say as well is that it's important for you to watching this video to take action. Dr. King died at 39 years old for us. There was an employment problem in Memphis, Tennessee. So the the sanitation workers, which were mostly black people down in Memphis, Tennessee, had issues with some union with the county or the city or so they couldn't get proper pay, right? They were making like pennies. They couldn't live on and they had this so important job that keeps society going. So they could not bring justice. They couldn't get the proper payment. That's how they brought Dr. King down to Memphis, Tennessee. This is a man who sacrificed his life, right? That's where he got shot. The Loretta Hotel, I believe it was April 4th of 1968. That was 4 years after the Civil Rights Act was passed into law. He didn't have to go down there. He went. So I'm saying all this to say that today you have the option of coming out. Not even if you don't help me. Let's just say you've been abused by some sort of discrimination. You have today the option to relatively comfortably spread your message. In my case, you can help me by sharing and liking and subscribing to my channel just to help the conversation going, to get going. You have this comfortable option today in 2023. 50 years from now, because evil is not going away. Just as good is here, it's in every human heart, evil is also here, and that's also in every human heart. Evil is not going away. You take a nap, then in 50 years from now, when you are leaving this earth and you're leaving your kids and grandkids behind, they will not have the option anymore. It will be so bad that the option will not be just to send messages and spread the news online. They will have to go back and go through what Dr. King went through. So that it's very important that we support one another. If you're a white person, you believe in human dignity, you believe in fairness, you help. If you're a Hispanic person, as you have seen, or any other race, have seen the discrimination, even a white person with some sort of disability or just personal vendetta. It's just not right for an institution with power and money, with tens of attorneys, like black or white. That's why I said in one of my videos, I want to start blurring the lines to basically speak to right versus wrong. Even though, let's just say 40% or most of the victims are black, but white, it doesn't matter. Anybody can get hurt by an institution who feels that they're above the law, right? They're above the law. They don't have to answer to anyone. They have the attorneys, they have the money. And eventually, in the long term, this is not going to play out well for the university. And they should know that. Anyone can do any research, like, and everything they do is on Google. So that power that they're abusing eventually from the public will be taken away from them by the public, right? Because we know collectively in the long term, this is not a sustainable game. Throughout history, there's been abuse and discrimination and so much bloodshed and all these fights with the civil rights people and wars and stuff like that. The human being, right? The collective, the population will always prevail. The people will always revolt against oppression and just crushing them down, crushing their sovereignty, abusive, in other words, good will always triumph over evil. That's been that way throughout history. So I would also like to speak about more about the difference between Dr. Gonzalez and some of the other faculties that I encountered at UM, right? Dr. Gonzalez, as a man, he was more impulsive. So thank God for him. I have some of the most important pieces of what happened to me, some of the most important evidence of where his mind was, of where the what he did, and eventually the others are just as responsible for allowing him to do what he did. A lot of that stuff was, so he provided me those paperwork, right? On the other hand, you have now his successor, Dr. Vladanov. She's more passive. She's more strategic. She's very quiet. She won't send emails. That, to me, is extremely dangerous. Is extremely, extremely dangerous. Now, the proof is always in the pudding. If she was in Dr. Gonzalez's position at the time of my ordeal, but the fact that she's much more, she lacked the impulsive. That's the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath, right? So I believe one of them is more calculated. It's like someone who would wait for years and years and years and spend days and not days, sometimes even months. Someone who has her emotions under control, but yet still can act from the dark side. That is like part of my um, job here on YouTube. It's to expose that. If you intend to go to UM, you want to know these kind of individuals, because there's not so much that she left behind. Now she's in his position. Perhaps they both could have been removed from UM or asked to resign. I don't know what happened to Dr. Gonzalez. It could have been both of them. But the fact that her record is a little bit more, she's more careful. The 4 areas that Dr. Gonzalez left blank would not have happened in the case of Dr. Vladanov. She's better at this. But the deed, she cannot fake the deed. After 1 day or 1.5 day of clinical with Dr. Vladanov, she called me into chief anesthesiologist Dr. Fiala, but he's the chief anesthesiologist at UMH, University of Miami. It appears that they spoke before she brought me in. This is a man I never worked with. I worked with her. He came into the room one time. We were doing a arterial line and then walked out. So he doesn't really know me as a student. He's one of the most busiest person in the area, and she kind of coerced him to take her side. All her complaints about my performance in front of him, so he kind of like agreed, like, okay, yeah, she's right, yeah. That's the difference between her and Dr. Gonzalez. Whereas Gonzalez trying to take the whole project by himself and sent some very inflammatory emails to me, she's more strategic. She went around bad mouthing me, gossiping about me, instilling doubts into all the preceptors. So how do you expect me to get good grades when you go around slandering your own student? So that's very important to see, and that's it. And the research shows that that's the difference between male antisocial behaviors versus female antisocial behavior. Females are more passive. They engage in gossip. A very important term I heard a few times at UM was, people have expressed concerns. They'll never give you any names, never gave me any names, never provided any emails of those quote unquote people that showed concerns. So they use the word concern to instill doubts. Let's just say they're on lunch and then she wants to, sabotage my clinical experience. So then, she would just, they would speak in the term of concerns. Once you tell a preceptor that you have concerns about a student, you have started something that they cannot recover from. You couch it under concern, but what you're really doing is that you're gossiping on against me. You're gossiping about me, which will cause the preceptor to be more apprehensive, to be more paranoid, and then that always lead to some poor evaluation. In her failing midterm evaluation that I put on our last video, you will see how she said, on this date I received a concerning email. On that date I received this other concerning email. She never forwarded me any of those emails, so which most likely means that she was lying. And this is you providing a document to remove me from the program, but then you have the nerve to say it's out of concerns. You're not concerned. You're discriminating. So that's how males are more aggressive and impulsive, but women, the worst form of antisocial behaviors, the worst form of narcissism and psychopathy is carried out by this passive, subtle, and ways that females carry out the dark side of their personality, the malicious acts of antisocial behaviors. I mean, the worst, the worst form of psychopaths are women who would do things and then start crying as if they're the victim. Like Dr. Hushman, biggest smile, very quiet. She uses very big words in her emails, but yet the deed, sadism. While I'm on Dr. Hushman, I once had a meeting with her, right? I think I mentioned that in another video, when I was returning after the first dismissal, after Dr. Prado gave me the green light to go back, although he forced me to repeat the course that I was unfairly failed, that they unfairly failed me. When I was returning back, I had a meeting with her and with Dr. Hushman, and I didn't ask her, and then she was telling me how that they've been so busy with graduation. You kicked me out. You attempted to kick me out. That was the first dismissal, which I've appealed. You attempted to remove me from the program one semester before graduating, and now our first meeting after, when I'm returning, I didn't ask you. You feel the need to rub it in my face to tell me how you guys have been busy with my class who just graduated. The positive delight in seeing the suffering of another human being at your hands. Sadism. Sadistic. That's what Dr. Del Paulis talks about. That's that fourth part of the dark tetrad of dark personalities. Very, very well researched. I mean, a very prominent researcher. So it's just not my words. I've had multiple occasions of seeing, like, if you see the emails that Dr. Gonzalez sent me, there's this positive delight, this grandiosity, this this sense that he just cannot be touched in his communication. So these dark personality traits are governing the entire institution. Some people are not as clever and they provide the receipts. Others are very subtle, but yet they still carry out the act. You could be that's the difference between truth and false. You can spend millions of dollars. You can spend all your intellectual wherewithal, all your intellectual prowess, right, to construct this lie. But a 2-year-old kid would just ask you a follow-up question that you just can't defend. The truth versus falsehood. Dr. Jordan Peterson also once said, when you are faced with a complex situation, the only thing you have that's solid under you is the truth. It goes back to the notion I once said that you tell a small lie, then you have to tell a bigger lie to cover that, then a bigger lie to cover that. And the whole time, the people you're lying to are just sitting there looking at you like, will you stop? Will you stop? Because nothing, you don't make sense. The more you lie, the more you erode your own integrity. You know, the more you show how, the more pathetic you look. And you could spend the next 3 years preparing this perfect lie. It will still not sit. There's something deep inside of us. There's something, it's almost like it's built within our system, our nervous system, to detect what people call, they smell, a rat or BS or whatever. You can feel it, that you're not being truthful. This is what the majority of a jury will feel when you begin to lie. It doesn't matter if you put on a white coat, you have a PhD, you this, you that, you the other. Once you start lying, the least educated person will just look at you like, stop lying to me. Just stop. Having said that, I will need to speak more. Like I said, I'll speak to the attorney and see if I can shed some of these recordings with you. Thank you for watching.
So do you want to start by explaining to people, let's walk through your research on the dark triad. How did you become interested in this, and how did you develop the measurement instruments, and what do you measure?
Well, like a lot of academics, my research can be traced back to my advisor, who was Richard Christie, the inventor of Machiavellianism as a trait. And he did something very clever. He went into the books of Niccolo Machiavelli, who was an advisor to politicians way back when, and he took the statements, administered them to undergraduate students, and simply asked them, how much do you agree with these statements? Like, you have to get to know important people, and always be prepared for the worst in people. And the amazing thing was the huge variance in the responses. And that's what personality research is all about. We look for and wallow in, relish the fact that people give different answers. And apparently, a lot of people agreed totally with the statements that Machiavelli made in the 1500s. Others were horrified by them. And so that inspired Richard Christie to make a questionnaire. The Mach 4, the most popular version of his questionnaires, was administered to subject pools at his university, Columbia University, and elsewhere. And it wasn't just self-reports, it predicted actual behavior. So he could show that people who scored high on the Mach 4 manipulated others in a room in a laboratory. So they would try to squeeze money out of other people by tricking them, and all of this could be recorded and published. Hence, Richard Christie is forever associated with Machiavellianism. So I thought that was a fabulous way to do research. I moved on then and took a real job at the University of British Columbia and met up there with Bob Hare, sort of the emperor of research on psychopathy, another aversive trait. And of course, he has done it all, but what he didn't do was compare it to Machiavellianism. And I've also done some research separately on narcissism, which captured attention of researchers in the 1980s, because it seems to resonate. Everybody knows narcissists, people who want a lot of attention and think they are superior to everyone else. Everyone can resonate to knowing such people. So we have 3 personality variables. Then when the student, Kevin Williams, came along, and typically in my career, I go with what the students want to do, we decided to figure out whether there were more. Are there more aversive personalities? So we searched the literature, and we did as much as we could back then, early 2000s, to cover all the literature and see if there were more personalities that were at the level of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. We call them the dark triad because they seem to dominate the literature. There are already hundreds of studies on each one of those. The unfortunate results, fortunate in the long run, I suppose, is that the literature's overlapped so much you could barely tell the difference. If you took all the literature on narcissism, all the literature on Machiavellianism and psychopathy, you could see the same things coming up. And that was the original problem. We want to parse the dark side of traits, but you can't really do much with the literature because of this phenomenon that we called construct creep. And that is, a researcher doesn't have the ability to research everything at once, so they focus on one variable. But it creeps wider and wider until it overlaps with other variables. And that's a problem because you don't know which one you're actually studying when you put it into a research program. Which one is responsible for the action you're seeing?
Right. Well, we want to talk about that in some more detail too, because I'd like to find out a bit more about how you feel. I know that the dark triad has morphed into the dark tetrad to some degree, and I'm also curious as to what you have to say about the overlap between the dark tetrad qualities and personality disorder categories, especially in the histrionic, antisocial, and narcissistic categories. Obviously, that shades into personality pathology. And so can I define the 3 traits and have you correct my definitions, if you would? So the Machiavellians, as you pointed out, Machiavelli was an advisor to princes who was really interested in some sense in the outright maintenance of instrumental power. I wouldn't say he was driven by any intrinsic ethic. It was Machiavelli gave advices to princes who wanted to maintain their position by hook or by crook, let's say. So Machiavellians are willing to use manipulation to obtain their personal ends. And narcissists seem to be driven by a high desire to obtain unearned status from others. And the most important thing for them is not status in relationship to competence, let's say, or in relationship to performance, but just in status for its own sake. And then the psychopaths, I spent a lot of time looking at Hare's research and thinking about it in relationship to the big 5. Psychopaths seem to be something approximating parasitical predators. And so they're very, very low in agreeableness, and that makes them callous and non-empathetic. And then they also seem to be very low in conscientiousness. That seems to accord reasonably well with the two factors of the psychopathy scale. And so a real psychopath is someone who is willing to take what you have, let's say, and use it, and that might be the predatory aspect, and also to live off the earnings and efforts of others, and that's also an element of criminal behavior. And so you're looking at the nexus of all three of those: Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. And recently, you and other researchers have added, I think this is so interesting because I think it was a real lack, you added sadism to that, which is positive delight and pleasure taken in the suffering of others. And so can you expand at all upon the definitions of Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy? And we could segue into sadism.
Yeah, I agree with all of your definitions, although what we did was spend a lot of time trying to find what's different among each of the characters and what the overlap is. Why is it that the literatures and the measures that were available always overlapped to a dangerous degree in trying to understand what's going on? So the key thing for psychopaths, in our opinion, is impulsivity and sensation seeking, which is what gets them into trouble. They may not have worse motives than the others, but they can't help it. That's why they, at the extreme levels, spend their lives in prison. They can't help responding to temptation. Temptation is they go for it, and often they get what they want right away, and they keep on doing it until they get caught, and they don't seem to learn from it. So that answers just a qualification to the definition of psychopath. Now, what's underlying it, we think, is callousness for all of them. They're overlapping because at the core is a failure to have empathy. And if you have a deficit in empathy, it seems inevitable that you're going to exploit other people in one way or another because you're not getting the feedback that people with empathy get in seeing other people suffer at your hands. And the story of sadism is quite a long story, but if you want me to get into the details,
sure.
I can do that now.
Yeah, please do, please do.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'm more sensitive to these things than other people, but I started seeing sadism in regular people. And not only